Today we continue our three-part mini-series about the future of electric aviation with the CEO and founder of Heart Aerospace, who wants to develop an electric commercial airplane. Join us for an inspiring conversation. This is the Evolution Show. Welcome to the Evolution Show. I'm your host Johan Landgren. The Evolution Show is all about connecting the dots to see the bigger picture and address some of the biggest challenges and opportunities of our time. We focus on smart energy solutions, electric transports, artificial intelligence, AI, and of course, inspiration for sustainable living. And today we continue our three-part mini-series about the future of aviation and talk about electric commercial airplanes. And back with us again, we have Anders Forslund, CEO and founder of electric airplane maker or developer Heart Aerospace. Welcome.
Great, thank you. It's great to be back.
Yeah, and now we talk a little bit about the impact you can have, or Heart Aerospace and electric airplanes can have on the climate crisis.
Yes.
How can we address that issue with electric airplanes? Is what I want to talk about today. And so my first question is, what's the biggest challenge, do you think, for us to make an adoption with fully electric airplanes on a global scale? Or perhaps on a local scale as well, of course. Yeah. But how can we address this issue with the electric planes?
I think the biggest challenge for aviation, like with any industry, but I think aviation in particular, is the inertia of the system. It's like a large ship that needs to be pointing in a different direction, and just the sort of process of building and certifying a plane is something that takes a long time, and it's frankly time that we don't have. No.
Now the researchers talk about 11 to 12 years, actually 11 right now, for us to turn the tide, so to speak. If we don't do that within that time, nature will have its course, whether we like it or not. So, but if you look at an airplane today and you think about how much it pollutes, if you compare that now to an electric plane, how much could we save? How much carbon can we stop or avoid from being emitted if you go electric?
Yeah, so I mean, aviation today is somewhere between 2 and 3% of the global CO2 emissions, and on top of that, there's other greenhouse gases that are being emitted, and there's also the sort of high altitude effects. So it might be actually a little bit more, and this is orders of magnitude less than, say, the road transportation, but on the other hand, aviation is really, really growing. So it's on this exponential growth curve, which is mainly fueled by the fact that 80% of the world's population has never set foot in a plane, and when they become a part of the global middle class or so, they will adopt the sort of Western ways of living. So I think we have a really opportunity for when the new markets develop, that they can be sort of going straight for electrification would be the dream. So kind of like how the cell phone became the first phone in many parts of the world. They never had landlines. I hope that electric aviation will be the sort of cell phone for transportation in many parts of the world.
Yeah, and I mentioned in the first part of our conversation that there is a spread of this idea of this thinking that we need to fly less, or at least not fly these conventional planes we have today, because and it's increasingly becoming sort of a shame to fly, especially if you fly these very long trips, and if you do that on a regular basis. So it's been sort of a taboo to talk about this, but it had changed the recent 2 years, I'd say. It's more kind of okay now to talk about this, especially in Sweden. But you touched about it. I talked about it a little bit. These high altitude effects. That's of course the long trips. But if you go back to your case, I mean, look at where you are and where you're going to address. It's in Sweden 30% of the market. So in theory that will be 30% of the domestic emissions you could actually avoid, and that's quite a lot.
Yeah, I would say that would be the absolute sort of low ballpark figure.
Yeah.
But since transportation today it's very air travel is very convoluted. You basically have to fly to Bromma or Arlanda to get anywhere. So the Bromma and Arlanda are the Stockholm hubs. For those of you that are not in Sweden, every time you have to fly, for instance, between two towns in northern Sweden, say Östersund, Örnsköldsvik, you have to go to Bromma or Arlanda. And if we can redirect those routes, we can actually fly a larger portion of the passenger traffic, and then we can also do stopovers. So I actually think that first of all we can address at least 30%, perhaps even more, likely even more, and also we can remove some of the emissions from road and rail transport, or some of that travel, move that into aviation instead.
Yeah, I was thinking that was a good thing to mention, because looking at freight and transports for airplanes in that sector as well could be interesting. If you think about 19 passengers is not so much, but at least you could transport some things. I would assume.
And there's sort of a misconception about planes in general, that they are very energy inefficient way of moving from A to B, and it's not really true. I mean, it is somewhat more energy inefficient than the others, but it's not like orders of magnitudes. It's sort of 30% more or so, and they come with a very low infrastructural burden. You don't need, so for every car in Sweden there's about 200 meters of road that needs to be maintained in summer and winter, needs to be built, etc. For every train ticket in Sweden there's about 20-30 euros worth of maintenance that's subsidized in that. So looking at overall global carbon footprint for aviation, it can be very, very competitive because there's very, very small infrastructural demands and very high utilization rates. So the problem with planes is that it's so efficient way of traveling across to Thailand, for instance, that it's very easy to do it. And it would be bad for you if you drove to Thailand as well.
Yeah.
And this is sort of also where the business model becomes a little bit strange, because you can find a ticket to fly to, like when I go to San Francisco, because that's where the company has a link to it with Y-combinator and all that, and we also have a sort of an office there. So that can be cheaper than flying a domestic flight to northern Sweden. And this is something that we want to address as well. We don't want people's, when people plan their holidays, they bring their families somewhere. It shouldn't be less expensive to go to Thailand than to go to, say, Gotland, right?
Yeah. So. Understanding, it's part understanding the challenge we have, the crisis that we actually have to address. And the other one is obviously the lack of alternatives.
Yeah.
So people don't know, where can I go? Can I go by train?
Yeah.
It's like to go to Central Europe from Sweden by train is very tricky. They're working on that now, but recently there was an issue with having enough night cabins. So there was no trains that were, okay to go on certain parts of the track or on the way down, so they couldn't go the whole way with night cabins, and that's kind of crazy. So people couldn't go. If you go to the 80s, the people couldn't just take a ticket from Stockholm and go to Berlin or wherever. There was no problem at all. So, and it's another experience. Then we have the trip becomes the journey in a sense. It's the experience with the family or the friends, and so there are benefits with that as well.
Definitely, and I have nothing. I don't think we're competing with rail travel. I think we're complementing each other. I've done a lot of interrailing in my youth and all of that, so I can romanticize train travel a lot as well. I think but as far as sort of efficiency of transportation, aviation definitely has a very important place to play. And I was also sort of going to address something that I think is important to acknowledge, is that we live in a sort of paradigm of mass tourism, where the sort of centralized nature of air travel has made it easy to come to one of these large tourist destinations. And this is also sort of affecting the sustainability of some of these places, like cities like Barcelona, they are essentially banning tourists or trying to get rid of them. You know, you have beaches in Thailand that are being, worn out or and stuff like that. So what I sort of, in my vision of the future, I hope that we can create a new type of travel where we're not just traveling far, but we're traveling deep into exploring other places. So we can also sort of spread out the tourism, so we don't see some places becoming overcrowded, affecting the quality of living for the locals. Instead, because there's so much to see and explore in the world.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that, because I thought I read recently an article where they talked about there's so many people coming from different parts of the world to Norrland, the northern part of Sweden.
Yeah.
Actually, it seems to be more people coming from all over the world than the Swedes themselves.
Yeah.
And they forget that they have this fantastic place in Sweden and Norway and other places here in the Nordic countries that are amazing.
Yes. Visit Scandinavia.
Yeah, definitely. No, but I really mean that, and that's the same in other countries as well, of course.
Yeah. And definitely. So yeah, as for my personal travels, I prefer to travel in Sweden these days because I love it.
Yeah, me too. So, but I also, for others that are interested, I mean, what encouraged you to develop and work on electric planes? What was it? Had it anything to do with your environmental concerns, or it was more like your engineering, curiosity, or?
I think it's sort of the planets aligned in many ways. So I mean, I grew up, like any kid, playing, building stuff with Legos and being very inspired of that. And I think I actually, like, when I made the decision to go into engineering physics, it was around 2002. This was sort of not the most inspiring time to be an engineer. There was not much happening. I think that engineering was viewed as something boring and all of that. And I sort of what exciting stuff was happening in 2002? Can you name anything? I don't know. Maybe there was, but
I know that I remember.
Yeah, right now, but I mean, now we have rockets landing on drone ships.
Yeah.
We have autonomous cars. We have electric cars. We have hyperloops, and okay, I'm only mentioning Elon-related stuff, but I think there's drones, whatever. There's this. I don't know. Engineering today is inspirational, and I think that it's also something that more and more people are understanding, that this is the solution. Some people say that we can't engineer our way out of the climate crisis, but I believe that it's absolutely essential. We cannot get out of the climate crisis without engineering.
No, I would agree. I think, but it's also important to mention that we cannot do only with that.
And it's not going to happen automatically.
No,
it's another thing. So it's not that we can relax. We have to support engineering, and people also have to study to become engineers.
Yeah, and I think just to mention that, so don't think I'm just thinking that being naive and think that the technology will solve everything. But I think it's a wrong way forward, and we also have to see that technology can be an door opener, and also very important, but we also have to think about different kinds of approach to our lifestyle, which you mentioned about. It could be tourism, working on vitalizing the local economy in different ways, because with that you have the benefits of less environmental footprints. So it comes with a lot of, and we feel better and so on. We're not mentally more healthy now than we were 30 years ago. And that's a bad sign.
Yeah, definitely.
It has to be, and it has partly to do with technology when we overuse it or we over rely on it, I think. So we as humans, I think we need both. We need to think ourselves, but also, of course, technology will be vital. I totally agree with you.
Technology is a tool, and it's a powerful tool, and it can be used destructively and constructively.
Exactly.
So it's something that needs to be, I think both, policymakers need to support the right kind of engineering, and engineers need to work on the right type of projects. And I think that we see that. And I think there's many things to said about the climate crisis, and I'm no expert in that, but As you mentioned, there's also the sort of existential, the meaningless of modern society in many ways.
Yeah, and I can also mention that some people, I think it's important not to make this kind of dichotomy that you either have technology or you don't.
Yeah.
This kind of black and white approach, because that's the wrong way forward. We have to meet in the middle, so to speak.
Yeah.
There's not only technology and there's not only nature.
Yeah.
That you have to combine them, I think. Then we can do great things.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
And I think one of the key aspects of this is to try to imagining a future together that is inclusive.
Yeah.
That is not, and I think this is important. I think that, so one of the reasons I'm very passionate about our mission is that we want to make it easier for people that live in the countryside, that are sort of sometimes, maybe they have a little bit higher transportation emissions than people living in cities, but we have to, like, everybody can be on board this ship of when we're transitioning to sustainable future. And everybody has an important part to play. And I think the aerospace industry, or the aviation industry, the airlines, etc., there's a room for all of this. They can actually be important, early adopters of new technology. They can lead the way forward. Yeah. So I think we should also encourage those airlines, for instance, that are going out of their way to try to do something to make it more sustainable.
Yeah, definitely. My final question is, if other people want to be inspired, they are inspired by you, but they think, what can I do? Whether it is in the aviation industry, perhaps, of course, that's the most important question for you. But if you want to help this transition with electric airplanes, do you encourage people to become engineers, or do you have any other things?
Yes.
Advice?
Yeah, I think study to become an engineer. That's a great thing. Really try to be really, really good. Not for yourself. Find your internal motivation. Find the thing that excites you. Don't just try to get a good grade, but try to develop a passion for the problem. The engineers I hired, they are much better than the teachers they had in school. Like you really have to have a passion for learning the problem and all of that. So I think but it's the best feeling to have, because I think that people feel powerless towards the climate changes, and it's easy to become angry at the people that are in charge, or the people that are have the power. But when you become an engineer, you actually get some of that power to actually be part of the change yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very good feeling to have. And obviously, if you're not into engineering, there's still a lot of things you can do. Support the policymakers. Make sure to talk to your local politicians, your parliament politicians, everybody to make your voice heard and say that, we believe you, we support you in this mission for electrifying aviation, because that makes all the difference in the world for us. I think there's historically never been an aerospace project that hasn't had, substantial government support. So it's an absolute deal breaker for us. And also support the airlines that are, committed to this type of work. The Swedish airlines are, world leading in this, buy the carbon compensation, buy the biofuels, and talk to them about electric aviation and say that you're excited about this and you're and that they're supporting it. So I think that give us love.
And on that note, I think just to mention, they are interested already from the Swedish aviation companies, some of them, and so they have shown that they are interested in electric
Definitely,
airplanes. So this is not just something on the paper. It's actually something that people are aware of, and it would be surprising otherwise.
I mean, both SAS and BRA have been tremendous for us, and also Widerøe in Norway. We're also in contact with the other airlines that are very, very excited about this, and I think they are very aware of the problem, and they're doing the best they can to help us out.
Thank you again for a very inspiring conversation. I learned a lot, and again, I think there is hope for the future when
Yeah.
it comes to aviation industry as well. It's moving on finally.
Yes.
And it's thanks to startups like you. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you. If you enjoy this conversation as well, feel free to continue the conversation in the comments below. As always, we appreciate your feedback. Was it good or bad? If you want to see the videos as soon as they come out, consider subscribing. In the next episode, we'll probably talk to two physicians. One doctor that's focusing on the relationship between climate and decreasing health. And also another student that's studying to become a doctor. She is very involved in this issue, and it's been a hot topic here in Sweden. I think that could interest a lot of other people from other parts of the world as well. So I hope to see you in the next episode.